All right, thanks for tuning back. For those still with us, again, thank you for the support. Let's move on to Chapter 5, The Moon, Mirror of the Firmament. The moon, mysterious, luminous, ever-changing, has long held a place of reverence, curiosity, and ritual in human history. In the conventional model, it is described as a rocky satellite orbiting Earth, reflecting sunlight and moving in predictable ellipses. But in the Earth Codex, the moon reveals a more profound and obscure role. Not as a sphere in space, but as a mirror of the Earth itself, embedded within the vibrational membrane we call the firmament. Let us reframe the moon as it truly behaves, not as a physical orb, but as a dynamic reflection, a light-form projection, or within the firmament's crystalline boundary. What we're seeing is not solid. It is recursively encoded information, reflecting the phase-structured pattern of Earth below. The lunar reflection, the echoes of Earth. Many observers have long noted something strange. When closely examining the lunar surface, especially during high-resolution photography or eclipses, the dark patterns, the so-called lunar maria or seas, bear uncanny resemblance to the Earth's continental features, but warped, flipped, or mirrored. It's as if the moon is not showing us itself, but us reflected back at a different angle in an inverted Earth, imprinted into light. And if the firmament is a membrane of recursive consciousness and vibrational coherence, this reflection is not only possible, it's expected. This is not symbolic mysticism, it's observational. The moon presents a consistent face to Earth, always showing the same side. Unlike any spinning celestial object in mainstream cosmology, it does not rotate in view. Because it is not rotating, it is locked, or rather fixed. This is consistent with the reflective or light-based projection, not a spinning rock in a vacuum. Lunar phases as magnetic filtering. The phases of the moon, waxing, waning, eclipsing, are often misinterpreted. They are not caused by Earth casting a shadow on the moon, nor by orbital alignments. Instead, in this model, they result from magnetic field modulation. As the fixed local sun drifts in and out through the magnetic grooves of the disk, it resonates, and therefore its angle of light interacts with the firmament. The moon acting as the interference reveals this modulation visually. The shifting light on the moon is the field's echo, not the geometry of cast shadows. Eclipses then are not alignments of spheres, but frequency-based occlusions, sudden filtering interference patterns, a moment where the sun and the reflected Earth field phase lock and produce a null, a shadow without an object. A light, not a rock. One of the most obvious truths to those who begin to waking up from the cosmological hypnosis is this: the moon emits its own light, cold light. Moonlight measured in the nature often shows cooler temperatures in the moonlight than in the shade, a phenomenon that retracts the idea of passive light reflection. The moon's glow is not merely reflected sunlight, it's its own field expression, a modulated harmonic perhaps drawn from the solar stylus itself and shaped through the membrane of the firmament. It glows not with warmth, but with memory. The moon as a witness. In many mythological traditions, the moon is known as the watcher, the reflector, the keeper of time. In this model, the symbology becomes literal. The moon stores light, not as energy, but as pattern. It archives the harmonic state of Earth, reflecting not just geography, but electromagnetic conditions, consciousness waves, and systemic coherence. It is important to emphasize what the eyes truly see, not just what theory dictates. One of the most consistent and undeniable observation across all cultures is the persistent luminosity of the moon, particularly during its full phase. This luminosity is not chaotic. It is harmonically precise, and it aligns directly with the model we've described. A fixed local sun phasing incrementally across the magnetic grooves of a spinning disk as the disk rotates, sweeping our landscape past the sun's position. The moon remains visible in the sky, catching the sunlights from a high angle within the firmament structure. Even as the sun sets, or more accurately, As we rotate past its fields of local influence, the moon continues to hold and reflect. That light clearly and sharply like a lens suspended with the upper lattice of the firmament. This is especially observable during the full moon, when the face of the moon is fully illuminated despite the sun being far outside the viewer's field of view. In the Earth Codex, this is not coincidence. It is coherence. The sun's light does not travel billions of miles, nor does it need to. Its influence is local, fixed, and vibrationally radiant. The moon is positioned to receive the radiant field and act as a reflective node, catching and bending the sun's light through the firmament's crystalline layer, down into the night-facing regions of the disk. This explains the ethereal glow of a full moon rising opposite the setting sun. The two are not astronomically opposed. They are field coherent. The light path is bent, captured, and revealed by the membrane's reflective dynamics. In this model, the moon receives the sun's localized field light even when the sun is phased far beyond the horizon. The moon's glow is not delayed. It's immediate, harmonic, and consistent with the sun's fixed geometry. The firmament facilitates this transmission not as an empty space, but as a conscious interface of light. This observation is accessible to anyone. No telescope required. Just attention, patience, and reverence for the system that holds us. If the sun writes the code of time into the grooves of the disk, the moon reads it back, softly, inverted, like a whisper in the sky. This chapter of the Earth Codex reframes the moon not as an object, but as a mirror, a recursive phenomenon of the living field. Its face, its glow, its behavior all match not orbital mechanics, but harmonic reflection. It is not a stone in space. It is us, seen from the edge of a dream. So I'll pause here for a moment before we get into chapter 6, the firmament. And so without obviously getting into the tons of data against the moon, right? Again, this is a simple observation too with the ancients and lunar cycles. I would question that I've been around women that the moon does things to them. And to me, from my spiritual understanding, is because women have a little bit different electrical system because they can give birth. And I've seen it. I think people have seen it outside of me. So again, that's another observation for myself. I haven't dived too much into that independently, but even just seeing it through all different contexts in civilizations across all spans of time, the moon is represented as a big part of that. So we can't leave it out in this model. Right? Like, that's one thing that obviously building it, I was like, I have to include it. It has, like, how does this, sitting with this for a long time, like, how does it work? Not fitting it in the model, just saying, actually, how does it work and magnetically in reflection? And what do we observe? And again, without getting too much into the data, where people have said, like, if these certain eclipses happen, you shouldn't see light that works around it at those times a certain way. And without getting too much into the specific data to try to have to prove people to keep them as a viewer right now, it's futile. You can go observe these things and sit with it. And I know that's one thing that I've recognized that's really cool, that makes sense when you start seeing and paying attention to the lunar phases as much. You see how quickly on really clear nights, like how fast that light source, even though it's below our horizon, so it's just phased out. It's still up, but it's phased out far enough in distance you can't see. So just like you need a telescope to see distance, right? So there's a certain distance you can't see. So it still receives that light source, and it still has its own cycle and its own calendar, and that's why it's natural in rhythm, a part of our whole codex, our whole system. So the moon has to be included in that when we put this together. So this is how it's integrated into the model. All right, so chapter 6 is probably one of my favorites. Not to get too much into it in here ahead of time, but obviously we know of all the different terminology now on the firmament across different civilizations, and they show their own representation of what could just better off be viewed as a membrane. And I'm not here to give absolutes. I often find when people have talked about the membrane or like this, the waters, or you're just trying to give, we have to discuss it in language so that we can discuss it, right? But we don't maybe necessarily, and even in this, I'm just giving a theory and an idea into the model that works, but also makes sense in what we can observe. But the firmament, as far as physicality or how it like really internally operates, like there's still maybe a lot of things that we have to take time to figure out with that, and that's fine. I'm not saying this is the one all be all, but this gives us at least some basis to start off of. So I want to say that first before I read this part, because that is important in context to understand that I'm talking more of the and really, I will say, when people are talking and trying to figure out this codex, our whole system, consciousness does have to take a play in it. So integrating consciousness and field structure, it has to give some value into your system, instead of we're just some randomness that I could go into all kinds of different debates of panpsychism to Bernardo Kastrup's theories of everything, all different types of people who are revered as some of the smartest people on earth in our time now. They often sometimes their videos don't get a lot of watches and things. I know because I watch them, but that is a lot of things, and sometimes respect to their models or how they see certain things, they're not integrating that huge element of consciousness into that field structure. So let's begin. The firmament, a membrane, not a dome. I truly understand the nature of the moon, its reflective behavior, its persistent glow, and its consistent face towards us. We must go beyond the physical and into the field that frames all light and perception. This field is what many cultures and ancient traditions have called the firmament, but that word has often been misunderstood. It's not a static dome, it's not a rigid boundary, it is much more profound and more active. The firmament is a living interface. The firmament is a vibrational membrane, a living interface between light, consciousness, and field structure. It is not a ceiling above us. It is not glass, steel, stone, or literal sky. Instead, it is a medium through which light is modulated, memory is encoded, and perception becomes experience. Wave collapse. In other words, the firmament is not a place. It's a process. It's just a pond surface reflects waves and patterns from the world above and below. The firmament refracts, and harmonizes energy, whether from the sun, the moon, or the observer within it. This is why the sky appears structured, orderly, and profoundly consistent from day to day and year to year. A medium of frequencies and light. When we look up at the sky, we are not merely seeing light traveling through empty space. We are seeing light that has been filtered through a responsive field, a membrane that behaves more like a lens, a resonator, and a recorder than like empty nothingness. This membrane filters frequencies of light and electromagnetic waves, encodes patterns, including solar, lunar, and stellar rhythms, maintains a consistent sky template across seasons, responds to gravitational and magnetic interactions, preserves coherence across vast swaths of time. This explains why time-lapse star photos, solar analemma recordings, and repeated celestial observations align so precisely. Even when measured over decades, centuries, or millennia, the firmament is a harmonic stage upon which the celestial play unfolds. The firmament and consciousness perception. Here's where the Earth Codex truly expands the frame of reference. The firmament is not only an interface of light, it's an interface of awareness. Just as a mirror reflects from back to the observer, The firmament reflects back not just photons, but information. Patterns of light shaped by intention, observation, and coherence. This does not mean that reality is imaginary. It means that reality is interactive. When you observe the moon, the sun, the stars, even your own emotional and cognitive states, you're interacting with a responsive field that records, reflects that intention back into experience. That's why constellations maintain their form across thousands of years. Solar and lunar cycles are embedded in human culture. Light behaves differently at different intensities and angles. Certain frequencies of sound or intention can produce measurable field effects. The firmament is the mirror between the internal and external, an echo chamber in which reality and awareness co-arise. The firmament and recursion. The Earth Codex model teaches that the firmament is recursive in nature. It echoes. Patterns repeat, not in coincidence, but because the field stores, reinforces, and replays them. Like the grooves on our metaphorical record, the firmament stores celestial time signatures, holds harmonic memory, echoes repeated patterns into experience, acts as the canvas upon which all light forms are projected. In this way, the firmament is not a static boundary, it's a living, breathing resonance field. So closing through this chapter, if you've ever felt that reality is not just around you, but responds to you, this is why. The firmament is not just a layer above Earth. It's an interface of coherence, and I would also say consciousness. Between light and form, between observation and experience, between memory and manifestation. It is the conscious substrate upon which the Solar Codex runs, the matrix that holds and harmonizes everything we can measure, observe, and experience. So I want to stop for a moment, and this is the end of chapter 6. Take a quick break and then get into the final reflections. And I know people are like, well, what are some of the observations seen here? I don't want to say deal is not the right word. A big connection I had with this understanding is the flower of life and field structure and how sacred geometric patterns and fractality really interplay into consciousness. So like even children, when they first begin to learn things, they first have to determine their consciousness is attaching that I'm physical and there's something outside of me. So they determine it by shapes, light, colors, all kinds of things. And they're just sponges, right? We are sponges. And that's our first determination. So it's a good way to say that the firmament kind of records that memory. And so our conscious connection with the fabric of reality is structurally built in, I guess is the best way to put it. So, yeah. So, well, that kind of wraps that up for the chapters. I'm going to take another quick pause before I get into the final reflections to wrap this short series. So if you've continued with me on this journey and viewing the whole video, amazing. And I hope you have a lot of questions for yourself and you're getting some guides to where that leads you on your journey as it led me. So let's pause for a moment before we get into this final section. Thank you.